Hi there. Welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local, the podcast where you can find inspiration, tips, and recipes for enjoying more local food and drink. I am David Crowley, your host. In today's episode, we'll be chatting with Greg Woodworth and Kelly Coughlin, who are the co-founders of Stony Brook Wholehearted Foods. I am looking forward to learning more about the Finger Lakes business that makes the tasty seed snacks I love, and also hearing about their culinary seed oils. Hello, Greg and Kelly. Welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local.
Hey, David. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're thrilled to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you here. And I was just showing you my big bag of your pepitas that just actually arrived yesterday. So the timing is fortuitous. As I was explaining to you, I first came across your pumpkin seeds in kind of the smaller packages that were slipped into a local food delivery service called Family Dinner that I subscribe to here in the Boston area. So you're close enough. I know you're out in the Finger Lakes area. I could drive out there, be a bit of a long drive, close enough that sort of is local food to me. And as we get into the conversation, I think you'll tell us a little bit more about how you are really much more local than most pumpkin pepita seeds we'll find in the market. But before we get into that, I want to know a little more background about you and your company. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the business of sending these tasty pepitas I have, and I know that we can get into some of the other products you offer as well. But how did you come to creating this company?
Well, it was sort of fortuitous. We had moved out to the Finger Lakes region from Boston, actually Jamaica Plain in particular, about 12 years ago. And we had moved out here having had started a different business in JP at an incubator there in JP doing cookies, believe it or not. And so the short story is that we left the incubator there, moved out here where we found a facility where we could grow the business. And we very quickly got involved in a project with Cornell, in particular, their Food Venture Center that's here in Geneva, which is where we now live and work. And they were involved in a project with a family farm that's in this neck of the woods, closer to Rochester. And the family farm is one of the largest growers and processors of butternut squash. And so the short story there is the farm grows and processes about 6,000 acres of butternut squash, and of that, a lot of it gets out to retail stores under brand names like Shaw's and Stop and Shop and Wegmans under their brand. So the little containers of ready-to-cook butternut squash, it is almost exclusively coming from Brockport, where they do all of that work. And so the seeds were a waste stream that was coming out of that process, and we were invited to collaborate on that project since we had a background in food, and eventually found out that we could create a culinary oil and some really tasty seed snacks that came from this upstream seed source from Martin Farm. So that's really where it started.
Well, that's Kelly. Kelly, you looked like you wanted to get in, so go ahead. What did you want to add to that story?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we're both Cornell grads, and so for us, and we met in school, and so this sort of had a coming full circle feeling to it when we were in Boston for a while, and then ended up moving out here. And one of the reasons we wanted to move out here, we initially moved out with our cookie business, was because we wanted to source all our ingredients locally. And the nice thing about the Finger Lakes region is there are all kinds of agricultural activities out here that we didn't know as folks from Massachusetts and New York City, that there was so much going on here with eggs and wheat that's turned into flour. All of it's local. And there's a lot of Finger Lakes is known for the wineries. Mm-hmm. And sort of its wine trails, but there's also a lot of food food production out here. And so Cornell has a really well-known program known as the Food Venture Center, where they work with entrepreneurs. And there are quite a few food entrepreneurs in the Boston and New York City area that actually come up here for training and technical advice on how to commercialize their pickles. Or one well-known client of theirs is Rick's Picks, who's done pickles, and there are a lot of other small businesses like that. So we were really excited to be able to work with them, and we hit the ground running with a really unusual product like this that folks in the region hadn't worked with before. So.
Well, that's excellent. That's a great example of, being entrepreneurial, taking advantage of an opportunity like that. And I love it because just what you're describing. Yeah, I'm definitely I'm pretty into wine, as I mentioned before we hit record, and familiar with Finger Lakes for the wine, but it's good to know. It sounds like it's a really thriving local food system, which certainly, as probably a lot of us we're interested in anyway, but the pandemic really underscored, I think, the fragility of these global food chains. So I think that sounds like a thriving example of a lot of a nicely integrated local food system. So sounds like a great spot to be.
Yeah, when we came out here, we definitely knew there were good vibes and good roots, and but we were totally surprised by the level of collaborative opportunities there are with farms out here. I think what a lot of farmers look at as a challenge is being able to have an added revenue stream that comes from what they call value added production. So a lot of farmers are able to grow and grow well, but it's that extra layer of revenue that they get in the off season that comes from product development, and a lot of them do it by working directly with entrepreneurs or food manufacturers to develop that revenue stream. So that's what makes it particularly exciting too, because the farmers a lot of them really look forward to doing this.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now I'm curious. So let's talk a little bit more about the products you offer, because as I shared, I have the maple pepitas here made from pumpkin seeds, but I have tried out those squash seeds with the chili flavor. Those are great as well. But the oils, tell me more about the oils. I wouldn't have thought to cook with, butternut squash seed oil. What does it taste like? What kind of things do people make with your oils?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Kelly, chime in whenever you like, because we're going along too. But we that was our flagship product, if you will, and was the product that really started the company. So for us, the idea of butternut squash seed oil came about from finding out that every seed that came out of Martin Farms from their as a byproduct, unbeknownst to us, each seed had approximately 20% naturally occurring oil in the seeds. And through the process of doing expeller pressing, which we started on that road, and that process of doing that, realized that there was really this incredible tasty oil that came from that, unbeknownst to a lot of us, and obviously ourselves included at that time.
And just to cut in, the reason we got into this was that the farmer was thinking, hey, would you guys be able to add this oil to your cookies, or could you make a cookie that would incorporate this? And there was actually a lot of interest in school nutrition at that time, and sort of, can you make a cookie that you could sell to school cafeterias that would satisfy nutritional requirements, like more vitamin A or more healthy fats? Yeah. And so what Greg found was, when he tasted it, it was like, this is great by itself in the bottle. We don't want to put it in, incorporate it in something else. And so that got us on this totally other path, where we were, for a while there, we were doing both the cookie business and the oil business. That just became a little too much for a small team like ours to do both. So we ended up jumping over. And the other interesting thing was, at the beginning, we had 4 varieties of squash. So we actually did acorn squash oil, delicata squash oil, kabocha squash oil, and butternut. And it was really interesting how they each had different flavors and had different paired well with different foods. But far and away, butternut was the most popular one, and that was the seed that the farm had the most of. So we ended up, we ended up narrowing it down to that, and then adding pumpkin seed oil a couple of years later.
Exactly. So when we first started developing it, because it's such an esoteric item, naturally a lot of people that we would speak to and anticipated were like, wow, this sounds exciting, but what do you do with it? What does it taste like? And if I had to describe it, it's really very similar to sesame oil, or Japanese sesame oil specifically. So it has a really intense sort of nutty flavor, almost hints of like peanut or sesame. And the color is a deep amber color, and it's very food friendly. I mean, we use it at home, honestly, on oatmeal because it has such a nutty flavor. And so if anyone out there has nut allergies but really would like to enjoy the flavor of nuts, it's a great alternative. But just like olive oil, you could use it as what we call a drizzle or a condiment or a finishing oil on roasted vegetables. It goes particularly well with roasted fish or seafood. And you could obviously use it in a vinaigrette recipe or combination. And we have some customers that honestly just use it as part of a health program where they want to get a plant-based oil that's high in omega-6 and omega-9 fatty acids, that's plant-based, and also naturally high in vitamin A and E.
And this time of year, my favorite way to have it is with all the squash that's coming in. It's just delicious, like brushed on delicata squash or acorn squash before you roast it. Instead of butter, it just has a really nice flavor. And it's also great on the grill. So if you brush it on corn on the cob or peppers or zucchini before you grill them, it really gives it a great flavor.
Yeah. And as we head into the fall season, naturally the connotation for fall, it's a great fit. So for soups, it's a perfect drizzle on any type of soup at all, particularly a squash or vegetable soup. But also we've used it in stuffing recipes for a garnish on roasted vegetables. It goes really well with stuff like Brussels sprouts and other green vegetables where people are looking for a little bit of a pickup in nutty flavor.
Oh, that sounds great. And now when you were describing the one, were you kind of talking interchangeably, or is that more the butternut squash that you had said was similar to the sesame oil?
Yeah, that was the butternut squash seed oil. Yeah.
That's great. And I was going to ask you, we do have a nut and sesame seed oil allergy in our house, and therefore, that definitely caught my eye when I saw that you're nut free and at your facility, and that is something I really, I've a lot of things it's easy to find, relatively easy to find substitutes. I've had trouble finding, like I've asked quite a few people, what do you substitute for sesame oil? Now maybe I have an answer. I'll definitely have to check that out.
Oh, we'd love to send you a bottle for sure. The interesting addition to our business, and you've mentioned it also with the pepitas that you have in the oil, is that about 3 years after we got the business going and got it started and really sort of got our business legs underneath us, we sort of, in a gentle way, sort of pushed back at the farm and inquired as to whether if they would be open to starting the growth of a new specialty crop. And in particular, we wanted them to grow what is called an oilseed pumpkin variety. And the idea there goes actually back to the wine varietals that grow really well in this region. So as you probably know, David, a lot of Eastern European, German, Austrian wines grow really well here in the Finger Lakes, particularly Riesling and Gruner Veltliner. So the thought was, well, what other crops that would grow well in that region of the world might grow well here in the Finger Lakes? And one of them is our oilseed pumpkins. And the Austrians think of their pumpkin seed oil that comes from these Austrian or Styrian pumpkins, comes from that. And they think of it as their version of olive oil, the same way that Italy, is famed with the idea of having great, fantastic olive oil, as do the Spanish and the Greeks. But for the Austrians, because of their climate, they actually rely on oilseed pumpkins to supply them with these wonderful big green hull-less pumpkin seeds. And the interesting thing is that the varietal is grown specifically for the seeds. It's the flesh is actually not used, and they compost the flesh and use it as a compost for the soil. So that works out well. But when you see the pumpkin and you cut into it, but even upon just visual examination of it, it's a beautiful pumpkin. Has an orange color with sort of green mottled splotches or patterns on it. Wouldn't you say, Cal?
Mm-hmm.
And people could see them online if you search under Styrian pumpkins.
Yeah, there are actually some really neat YouTube videos of the harvest. So the harvest is a very unique process, and the farm we work with ended up importing all the equipment from Austria in order to do the work. So it's a very, being Austrian, everything is very highly precise and engineered to get the maximum harvest in the minimum amount of time. And it's almost like, it almost looks like a torture device, because there's this wheel of spikes that goes around, spikes all the pumpkins, it shreds the flesh, separates the seed, the flesh goes back to the field, and the seed goes in a big hopper, and then the seeds are dried, and then so when we worked with the farm, we're actually importing the seed that they're growing from Austria, because that type of seed is just making it into the catalogs here in the States. So it's still very uncommon to grow this type of pumpkin here.
Yeah. So to clarify, the farm, when they get ready to do their planting at around April, the seeds that they're planting in their soil here in Brockport are seeds that we're having to buy from Austria right now, because there isn't enough of a quantity or a supply that we can get from U.S. seed suppliers for farmers. So so they're buying that, planting them here to the tune of about 200 acres, and then in the fall, actually next month, they'll begin the harvest of the pumpkins that they have here in Brockport at Martin Farms.
Oh, great. Oh, so a lot of creative stuff going on there, definitely. Now, I'm curious, as you're describing it, maybe you've hinted at the answer, but people might be trying to visualize how where things get passed off from the farm to you. Like, do you wind up getting the seeds? Like, I'm picturing, when I scoop out a squash or a pumpkin, all that gunk, like, who gets that? Does that come to you and you sort that out, or
we used to.
Well, yeah, we did in the very beginning, and that was sort of our pilot and trial phase in doing this. But to pick up where Kelly was talking about the equipment, once we confirmed that this varietal grew well in our region, and that Martin Farms, quite frankly, was willing to grow this and grow many acres where they would be effectively trading off other crops that they could grow, then they decided to make the investment in the equipment for this. And as Kelly had mentioned, it's very specific, specialized equipment for pumpkins. And so that equipment was imported, brought over, set up, and it's amazing, David. The equipment really begins with the combine that's in the field that Kelly was talking about, that has the big wheel of spikes, and those seeds go through a process of washing and drying and then screening the seeds to clean them. So what we get here in Geneva, which is about 45 minutes southeast of the farm, what we get are 1-ton pallets of dry pumpkin seeds that are in 25-pound bags. And
ready for culinary use.
Just ready to use. And the cool thing is the seeds go through a cleaning process where at the end of this, the seeds are also ready to eat raw, just like you would with almonds or walnuts or something in your bulk food section.
They go through a special sanitization process as part of the cleaning. So we get that question a lot. Are they
safe to eat raw?
Yeah, and so they do go through a step where they're sanitized so that they're ready to eat. And another thing that folks don't really understand is about the harvest. So because we are in the Northeast, you can only grow pumpkins at a certain time of year, and then that's it for the year, and then you plant them again the following spring. So we'll often get questions from people like, oh, well, I don't want it if it's last year's harvest. And it's like, everything is last year's harvest. Yeah. And so there's really no such thing as, I only want the most recent, because the seeds only come in, they're harvested in a 2-week period in the fall. And then because of Mother Nature being what it is, you got to really hustle and get them out of the field before they start to sprout. And then that's it, and that's your seed for the whole year. So from a planning standpoint, it's a challenge for a farm and for a food processor like us to try to figure out, how much are we going to need next year?
Oh, right.
So does the farm have to grow, because that's all we're going to have until the next harvest comes in.
Yeah.
And so that's always a bit of a challenge to explain to people. You're still getting fresh product in June or July or September. Right. It's not old. In fact, a lot of the pumpkin seed on the market that's coming from China, we're guessing it's probably 3 to 5 years old. So it's very rare that you can kind of trace when it was harvested and how old it is.
Yeah. Yes. But for us, we're very fortunate that we have that. And that process of drying them, just like you would once again with almonds or walnuts, ends up with something that's shelf stable, that's dry, and that has the seeds themselves in that state. We have done some, shelf life studies here at our facility, and so far we're up to 3 years for the shelf life of those seeds dry. And I think what our differentiating factor is that we are working directly with a farm that's 45 minutes away, versus something that would be imported, where in some cases a lot of manufacturers, and understandably, they may have a great relationship with their distributor or who they're buying the seeds from, but they may not necessarily have that relationship or connection to the farm that actually grew them and processed them. So I think that's what sets us apart.
Yeah, so you have that real close relationship. That's great. And you've hit upon it a little bit, but let's underscore the point, because I know that there were 2 reasons I thought you'd be great for this show with the local food theme. One is, you're relatively local to where I am here in the Boston area, out to your area in the Finger Lakes. But when you compare, getting the product from you compared to, I didn't realize how much of pepitas on the market were imported. So do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we found that out ourselves, and to verify, and that we first heard about it through buyers as we started experimenting with the seeds and getting them onto the market. And quite honestly, it was a situation where we were talking to buyers of health food stores, and also buyers for manufacturing where pumpkin seeds were being used. And as we approached some of them and spoke to them, and a lot of it, quite honestly, was very sort of was hush, because it wasn't that manufacturers or even your friendly neighborhood co-op was looking for imported pumpkin seeds. It was the availability or supply of green, hulless, ready-to-eat pumpkin seeds. And so, that's really what we began to find out through conversation. So to substantiate that, we were very fortunate that we had a connection with Florence Fabricant of the New York Times. So she writes for the food section and does a lot of work where she does product reviews in her front burner section that comes out every Wednesday. And so we contacted Florence and had this conversation with her about this very subject. And even she was initially like, really was sort of like, you've got to be kidding me. I have pumpkin seeds at home. And so it was great because she had that curiosity about this and sort of did her own due diligence, which we, were really happy with. And really that was our intent. And she ended up speaking to a couple of different growers in the United States, particularly one that's up in the Pacific Northwest that's been doing this for quite a while. And their statement to her was that conservatively, 75% of pumpkin seeds of this type, this green hulless variety or pepitas on the U.S. market, 75% were imported. And of that, almost exclusively, they were coming in from China. And so it was really, for us, it was an aha moment as a entrepreneur, food processor, manufacturer like us to say, wow, there's a real opportunity here.
And one thing just about the sort of history of it is what we realized as we started learning more about it is the whole idea of a pumpkin seed, as you think of it in a granola bar or something now, is basically a Chinese creation. So because labor is so cheap over there, these are actually seed kernels that actually have a white hull, a lot like a squash seed. Or a pumpkin seed that you'd see in a Halloween pumpkin. So they actually steam the hull off so that it pops off, and then the kernel is what winds up as the snack. And so they created that market because they developed the technology to do that. It's entirely a Chinese development to get that volume of seed in the American market. And prior to that, the Austrians were doing it locally, but they weren't selling internationally. And then the Mexicans, originally the word pepita is a Yucatan term for a roasted pumpkin seed, where even in Mexico, they weren't well known. It's very regional. So just the Yucatan region and some other regions. So it turned from what was formerly a really regional product that only that local population tended to eat to something that became
sort of ubiquitous,
well known. And so then the pumpkin seed market sort of capitalized on the fact that everyone thinks pumpkins are an American thing and that everyone's growing, it's like, grandma's jack-o'-lantern pumpkin or something. When in fact it's not at all and had no roots in that at all. And pepitas, the word pepitas has sort of been corrupted in recent years, but formerly it strictly meant a roasted salted seed versus the raw seed that's just a pumpkin seed. So,
or you'll hear we don't speak Spanish, but semilla, you'll hear that for as a seed type. But so from there we were able to make our own pumpkin seed oil, since we already had the expeller pressing equipment and the processes in place to make butternut squash seed oil. And that oil is totally different. It has a very deep green, almost hues of red in the oil itself. And the flavor is a very delicate nutty flavor. When I first tasted it, it actually reminded me of pistachio oil, which is also by itself a very esoteric sort of different oil, but it definitely has that color and flavor. But the mouthfeel has a silkiness to it that's really makes it stand apart, I think, from other oils. And it has a very low smoke point. So the Austrians really use it almost exclusively as a condiment, but they will put it on everything from scrambled eggs to potato salad. They use it for sweets and pour it on ice cream. Yeah, but
like over it, like not to make it.
The same way that we Americans enjoy hot fudge sauce on ice cream. They will actually drizzle pumpkin seed oil over ice cream. And I mean, hey, ice cream, whether it's vegan or dairy, I mean, you got to try it. And there's very little downside there to it. But once again, it has a nutty flavor. So you almost think of it as it's like liquid pistachio nuts, if you wanted to think of it that way. So it's got a lot of uses too as a finishing oil. Once again, that really pair well with different meats, fish, obviously vegetables for salads. And in that situation with pumpkin seed oil, we actually have a significant number of people who order from us that say that it's just part of their health lifestyle. They want to have, once again, a plant-based oil that is high in healthy omegas, plant-based fats, no cholesterol, and just want to integrate this into their diet. For health purposes.
And it's very good for things like prostate health and things like that. So people that are trying to pay attention to that and work that kind of food into their diet. There aren't many foods like that sort of really are specific to certain conditions. So,
and that's sort of what we have heard. And I guess for your listeners, and we want to be clear, we're not here to make any medical claims, but we actually, as a small company, so just so people understand, there's 5 of us in Stony Brook Wholehearted Foods, and I sort of man the office and do a lot of the customer calls and customer service, customer relations. And we get phone calls from customers that are adamant telling us, how good pumpkin seed oil is for different ailments. It's really funny to have people that call me and say, oh, did you know it's good for this and that? But it's, the property of the oil is that it has some anti-inflammatory properties. Wouldn't you say, Cal? And that's, I think, where people look at it from a health perspective.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, the way you're talking about how the Austrians use it so much, it's interesting how, traditionally most food cultures, get built around, and traditions get built around what's local and available naturally within a region. So like to us initially that, we're not as familiar with using, it sounds a little unusual to us maybe thinking about those uses of pumpkin seed oil, but it's what's there. So I'm sure it's like nothing if you're in Austria. But here in the U.S. we do have that luxury of kind of almost like picking from some of these the best of various food traditions around the world. It sounds like this is one maybe that's on the upswing here in the U.S. with these seed oils.
Yeah. And then the idea of pepitas as a snack really, oddly enough, came after we had started making the oil, which sort of sounds backwards, but it's honestly what we did. And we had to roast the seeds in order to prepare them for expeller pressing. And our roasting is a low, gentle heat process that just prepares the seeds for being pressed for their oils. And so you just want to gently warm them up so that you can get those oils that are naturally occurring in the seeds ready and accessible for an expeller pressing. But during that process, when we first started doing it, we would sample the seeds and taste them. It was one of these things where we had been doing it for like 2 years, and it was like, wait a minute, we could be selling. I'm not kidding, David. It was one of those things where we just felt like it was something that we should have been doing, and very quickly we were able to commercialize that, and that really became what is now one of the best-selling product in the company. So, going from what was originally a cookie company to really Stony Brook Wholehearted Foods as an oil company, to now Stony Brook Wholehearted Foods as being a seed snack and raw seed provider of seeds and seed snacks to people is really what the company is now, I think, really known for.
Our focus is really about, getting back to this idea of local food. Is that really started as one of our core principles. Is we wanted to produce oils that were from locally grown seeds. So that's really something we've been able to stick to. So sunflower oil is another one that we do with sourcing local sunflower seed and pressing that. And that's something where and we've also been able to stay, as you said, nut free and kind of provide what we hope are sort of local oils. We're a little surprised at the lack of interest in sunflower oil, actually. In terms of cooking with it, it's just the fact that it's local and it's so fresh. It's really enjoyable, and it's really neutral, but so for frying potatoes or something like that, it's great, and it has a higher smoke point
yeah. So like instead of canola oil or something or other vegetable oil, it'd be a great healthy and local choice. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think part of it is just that some of these seed oils have a little bit of a stigma in terms of their health and in diet, and people who are trying to cut back on omega-6 fats and things like that. But it's still a great alternative for you. You'd still need that oil to fry something in or whatever.
Right.
To go with something that's local instead of an avocado oil or grapeseed oil.
Hopefully. I was just going to say, hopefully in some small way, we're helping, spread the gospel of your seed oils a little bit here. But to do that effectively, people need to know, I sort of, if you want to let people know, where to find, are there stores they can find your product at? And it might depend on where they are. I know I ordered my big bag directly from your website. So I want to break down how folks might go about getting their hands on some of what you have to offer.
Yeah, definitely. So we do sell our pepita snacks are in all Wegmans stores. So we are there in terms of retail. And then we're also, in terms of oils, another great platform for us. And unfortunately, COVID really cramped their style for a while, but our olive oil tasting bars, which most major cities have one, and a lot of tourist destinations have them. So they are these really neat concept where you'll walk into the store and they'll have fusti's with different oils. And we sell our squash seed oil and pumpkin seed oil in these shops. And what's really nice is it allows you to kind of taste everything, see what you like, see what would go with it in terms of vinegars and things like that. They also have a lot of online presence where they sell. And then we, of course, have our online store. So our website is wholeheartedfoods.com.
And that would be the easiest way for your listeners to find us, learn more about us. And if they wanted to place orders, everything that we've been talking about on the show and more is available on that website.
Yep. And if you just Google Stony Brook oils, we'll come right up. So that's a quicker way to do it.
But the URL is wholeheartedfoods.com. And also for your listeners, we'd also like to provide, if you want, a discount code that they could use.
Oh, great.
Just for your listeners.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So we could give that to you now, or you could put it on however you'd like to do it, David.
Yeah, do you want to say you give it now, and I can also put it in the show notes page?
So when they place their orders, if they go into the coupon code and put in local 20 as one word, LOCAL, the number 2 and the number 0, all as one word, they'll get a 20% discount on their order.
Great. Well, that sounds wonderful. Well, I've enjoyed your snacks, and I look forward to trying the oil. And it's great to hear so much more and learn about, both this as a local food product, but also very innovative entrepreneurial business. So keep up the good work, and it's been great chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much, David. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cook Local, Eat Local. To get the show notes with links for recipes and resources we covered today, go to cooklocaleatlocal.com to get the podcast landing page. And please be sure to subscribe to Cook Local, Eat Local wherever you get your podcasts. Make it a great day with some tasty local food on your plate.